Hey, it's Clint Garrett, Ace Networker, and I want to welcome you to the cheat code. This is the cheat code that is used to easily solve any subnetting question or any subnetting scenario that you may encounter. And this is both on certification exam tests as well as in real life, whenever you have to use those in your networking career or your future networking business. This is going to make subnetting very, very easy and very simplified for you. And it just takes a few minutes to kind of memorize this, and you can use it from now on as many times as you like, anytime you like. And the benefit to being able to use this is that you may encounter anywhere from 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 questions on especially on a Network Plus certification exam, sometimes on a CCNA level exam, or even on a CCIE exam. You'll get 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 questions dealing with some type of subnetting scenario or subnetting question that you have to answer. So it's good to know exactly how to answer those so that you can save yourself time and give yourself more time on all of the other questions and the simulators and the other protocol questions and technology questions that you're going to encounter. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. This is one of many methods you'll find out there, but it's the method I came across years ago, and it seems to be the easiest of them all for solving most subnetting problems. So here's the deal. When you sign up for a certification test and you go into the location to take the test, be it for Cisco or Microsoft or CompTIA or many others, it typically goes like this. You walk in there, you sign in, you show them your photo ID, you empty your pockets, and you're given a scratch paper and a pen or pencil, or the last few times I took certification exams, a laminated small piece of paper and a permanent thin-tipped marker, and that's it. You don't get a pager, a cell phone, nothing. You typically have to take off a watch if you have one on. Nothing is allowed in that exam room except the clothes on your back. So this cheat sheet I'm showing you is something you can easily create from memory while you're taking this exam. In fact, you can just rehearse this in your mind and you'll have it down pat. I would advise you, and you don't have to do this, it's only a suggestion, but I would advise you to write this small but legibly down on that scratch paper or that laminated paper that you get as soon as you sit down and the assistant logs you in and gets you started. So the first thing you want to do is you want to write down a column of numbers from 1 through 8, like this. At the top of that you want to write network, or NW for short, right above that column of numbers 1 through 8. Then you want to, next to those numbers, you want to write down all of the possible subnet mask numbers that can be used in an octet for the subnet mask. Now, this is not for the IP address. We're talking about for the subnet mask. These are the numbers that we know we can use in a subnet mask. Now, we talked about those in earlier videos. If you need to go back to refresh, go ahead and do that. To the right of that column, you're going to write down numbers 7 through 0, like this. And at the top of this column, you're going to write hosts. And that's it. It should look like this when you're done. The hardest part about this is actually remembering the numbers in the middle of the column, the numbers that you can use in a subnet mask octet. But to make that easier to remember, you can do this. You can start with 128, obviously, that's the first one, and then divide it by half, which is 64. And then just divide by half from there on. You're going to make a kind of a half numbers list if you need to. The next number, 64 divided by half is 32, divided by 1/2 is 16, divided in half is 8, divided in half is 4, 2, and then 1. So since 64 is the first half number, we'll call it, that you have from half of 128, that first number there, you're going to add 64 to 128, and you get the next number in the column, which is 192. And you keep doing this, but you'll take the next half number in the half number list, we'll call it, and we'll add it to 192. So the next number in the half number list is 32. That was half of 64. So 192 plus 32 is 224, so that's your next number in the column. 224 plus the next number in the half number list, which is 16. That's 224 plus 16 is 240. 240 plus the next number in the half number list is 240 plus 8, that's 248. And 248 plus 4 is 252. And 252 plus 2 is 254. And 254 plus 1 is 255. And again, this is entirely up to you. If you need to list the half number list over here to help you get the middle column of numbers correct, then by all means do so. These are pretty easy to memorize, but if they're not, you can use this half number list to kind of work that out too. I would recommend you kind of mark through it like this because you won't actually need the half numbers list ever again. Also, notice on this list that the network column number plus the host column number should always equal 8. because you have 8 bits in an octet, any octet. The other part of the cheat sheet is the powers of 2 that we saw earlier. And that's it. That's all you need. So let's get to it, and I'll show you how easy this is to use. Here's a sample subnetting question you might see on an exam. Given a Class C address, what is the subnet mask needed to provide at least 12 hosts per subnet? So first of all, we have a Class C address, which is a classful mask of 255.255.255.0. That's a Class C subnet mask, classful. Get out the duct tape and stick down the first 3 octets, because we know we're not going to be working with those first 3 octets. Now, you look at the power of 2 table that you wrote down, and we need at least 12 hosts per network. So 2 to the power of 3 is only going to yield 8 hosts that we'll be able to use. So 2 to the power of 3 we can't use. The next one up is 2 to the power of 4, because 4 bits yields 16 combinations we can use, and we actually just need, what did the question ask? At least 12 hosts. At least. Okay, so since we're using 2 to the power of 4, you're going to look up the number 4 on the hosts side of the cheat sheet. Remember, we're looking for hosts. Now, this is because the question specified at least a certain number of hosts. Remember? Just keep that in mind. We're looking for a certain number of hosts. We have to have at least 12 hosts, okay? So, a 4 on this cheat sheet will yield a mask of 240. Now, since the first 3 octets are untouchable, why is that? Again, because it's a Class C address, and the first 3 octets of a Class C classful subnet mask don't get touched, okay? It locks those down. They duct tape those down, like we were talking about in a previous video. Since the first 3 octets are untouchable because of our duct tape, the mask will be 255.255.255, we already know that for a fact, .240. Now, can it really be that easy? Yes, it can. Now that you know the nuts and bolts of how subnetting works and why it's used or why it's needed, you can use this cheat sheet to easily solve problems like this one. Let's try another one. The question here, given a Class C address, okay, once again we're dealing with Class C, and the question specified that. So given a Class C address, what is the subnet mask needed to provide at least 20 subnets or 20 subnetworks? So what are we dealing with here, first of all? What's the first thing you noticed? It's a Class C. So we're going to get out our duct tape, we're going to lock down the first 3 octets. We can't touch them or we can't work with them because the division that this subnet mask is going to provide for the IP addresses being used doesn't fall within those first 3 octets. So we know that for a fact. It's a Class C, those are locked up, okay? So what Class C limits us to in this question is those 3 octets being locked down. And what is it this question is forcing us to solve? At least 20 subnetworks, okay, or subnets. 20 subnets works out to be 2 to the 5th power, which is 32. Because we can't use 2 to the 4th power, and why is that? Well, 2 to the 4th power only gives us 16 combinations or numbers to use. And we have to have at least, how many? At least 20 subnets that we can use. So on the networking side, the subnetworking side, we know that we have to use a certain number of bits in a subnet mask that gives us 20 subnetworks to divide that into. And then whatever number of hosts are provided, once we figure that out, that's what it's forced into. But the question is forcing us into 20 subnets. We have to have at least 20 subnets. So 2 to the 5th yields 32. That gives us an ample number of subnets to use over 20. We need at least 20. Since we use the 5th power of 2, and we're needing at least that many networks or subnetworks, same thing, we look up 5 on the network column side of our table or cheat sheet here. Now remember, the question asked for the number of subnets, not the number of hosts. So what does that 5 yield us in our shortcut cheat sheet here? Well, it yields us this answer. So we already know it's Class C, so the subnet mask, that's what we're looking for, that's going to give us 20 subnets, at least, is going to be 255.255.255, we know that already, dot, what? 248. Why? Because we looked at our cheat sheet. to the 5th power is 248. Let's give this one a try. Given a Class B address, what is the subnet mask needed to provide at least 100 networks per subnet? Now, don't let the fact that this is a Class B network bother you, okay? All it means is that instead of you only having 8 bits to play with in the last octet, now you have 16 bits to work with or play with in the last 2 octets. There's 8 bits per octet. So here's how we solve this. And first of all, we know this is a Class B address, so we duct tape down the first part of the subnet mask. We know that's the first 2 octets. So we know those are going to be 255.255, okay? We just need to figure out what the last 2 octets are going to be. If we need at least 100 networks, we're going to need 7 bits. Why? Because 2 to the 7th power is 128, which gives us at least 100, which is what the question is demanding of us. So again, go back to the wording of the question and get specific about what is this question asking for and what are the parameters it requires of me by asking for this answer. It needs at least 100 networks. Okay, so 2 to the 7th power is 128. That's at least 100, right? 128 is at least 100. So since we're looking for the number of networks and we're not looking for the number of hosts, we're going to look up 7 on the networks column of our table or cheat sheet to find 254 for the subnet mask. But wait! Now, since this is a Class B address, Class B, not Class C, and we duct tape the first 2 octets, and we determine that the next octet, the 3rd octet, is really our decisive octet. It's kind of the one deciding where the breaking point is between the subnetworks and the actual hosts of that IP address that are used inside each of those subnetworks. This 3rd octet is going to be 254. So it's the one that makes that decision, that division point on the IP address. So in this case, what do we do with the last octet? Well, since the last octet is not on the side of the mask that determines the networks or the subnetworks, it falls on the side that determines the hosts. So therefore, it's going to be 0 or all zeros. 8 binary zeros in the last octet equals 0. So the answer to this question, written in decimal form, is 255.255.254.0, because that 3rd octet, again, is where the division point takes place. That's where that subnet mask tells that IP address you are either in this subnetwork or another subnetwork at this point in the 3rd octet, and the rest of the numbers after that or between that and the next subnetwork are your hosts that can be used. And that's pretty much it. So I want you to practice these. I want you to see if you can find some practice subnetting questions that you might find on certification exams. I'm going to try to provide some good PDFs down below this at some point, because in this free subnetting course you need to get started the right way. And the reason subnetting is so important is because when you go to take a certification exam like Network Plus or CCNA, or even when you get in and start getting into CCNP, you're going to find that anywhere from 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 questions on that certification exam deals with some type of subnetting or understanding subnetting or even supernetting. If you can quickly speed through these and find the answer to them, then you are saving yourself or creating that much more time that you can spend on the other questions on the certification exams. If you can get subnetting down pat, and whether you have to use a cheat like I just showed you or some other methodology, you will have a good foundation that you can stand on when it comes to learning about every other aspect and protocol in networking and how networks work. Subnetting and understanding of subnetting and being able to kind of picture it in your head, and you'll do that the more you practice this, but subnetting is one of the key aspects of understanding networking overall. Once you get that down, once you can figure out what IP address is needed or what IP addresses you can use or what IP addresses you want to use, or whatever the question or situation may be, you are already possession is 9/10 of the law. So once you understand this knowledge, you are over halfway there. Easily. The rest is just details and concepts and can be learned a lot more easily, it seems like, in my experience, than subnetting. So with that, I look forward to seeing you on the next step. Hopefully you will check out the next offer that we have here, and I will see you on the other side.